প্ৰিয় শ্ৰোতা, আজি ৰেডিঅ' ক্লাছৰুমত উপস্থিত আছে গোৱালপাৰা মহাবিদ্যালয়ৰ প্ৰাণী বিজ্ঞান বিভাগৰ সহকাৰী অধ্যাপিকা মিছ মাৰ্মি থাউচেন বাইদেউ। বাইদেউ, আপোনাক আমাৰ ষ্টুডিঅ'লৈ বহুত বহুত স্বাগতম।
Thank you. Hello, dear students. Today, I'll be discussing a very important topic of your syllabus, that is shifting and Jhum cultivation and its impact on the biodiversity. But before we dive directly into the details of the topic, let us have a brief understanding of what is environment, what are environmental studies, and why do we need environmental studies. Let us first start with the definition of environment. So, environment can be defined as a sum total of all the living and non-living elements and their effects that influence human life. The living or biotic elements include plants, animals, forests, fishes, and birds, and the non-living or abiotic elements include water, land, sunlight, rocks, and air. In simple words, we can also define the environment as our surroundings with several biotic and abiotic components. Then what is environmental study? Environmental study refers to a systematic study of the environment and its physical, biological, social, cultural, and natural factors. We can say environmental studies are all about learning how we should protect our environment with sustainable strategies. Environmental study is contradictory to environmental science, which mainly focuses on the scientific component of environmental issues, while environmental studies explains the causes, effects, and solutions for environmental problems. With growing population and human activities such as pollution and deforestation are seriously affecting the environment, just as earthquakes and tsunamis do on the environment. Now, let us understand what is the necessity of environmental studies, or why do we need environmental studies. We all know that the environment is the 21st issue of the 21st century. There are many alarming issues related to the environment. Pollution, growing population, deforestation, depletion of natural resources, and other disasters are behind the environmental concerns. So, an individual or government cannot maintain environmental sustainability alone. We all should have a contribution to its protection from damage. And for the proper guidance on the values, skills, knowledge, and tools to work against these challenges, both formal and informal environmental education methods are needed, as well as to prepare the present generation for environmental protection. We need environmental studies. With the continuous diminishing of the Earth's resources, it is for sure that something has to be done. Now the time has come when every citizen of the world has to be aware and actively participate in protecting this beautiful environment. So, keeping all these points in view, in India, to create awareness among today's generation on pressing environmental problems, the University Grants Commission, that is UGC, has made it mandatory for the universities to introduce a course in environmental studies and teach students about the ecosystem, pollution, and problems concerned with the environment. Dear students, I hope you have understood the concept of environment, environmental studies, and why do we need environmental studies. Now, let us go straight to the main topic of today's discussion, that is shifting or Jhum cultivation and its impact on the environment and biodiversity. Let us first start with a brief history of shifting cultivation or Jhum cultivation. Shifting or Jhum cultivation is one of the most ancient systems of farming believed to have originated in the Neolithic period around 7000 BC. It is also called slash and burn method of cultivation. This system of cultivation is regarded as the first step in transition from food gathering and hunting to crop husbandry. However, it is still practiced in the hilly areas of the northeastern states, including certain pockets of India. Shifting cultivation is known by different names in different places of India, such as in the hilly states of northeastern India, it is referred to as Jhum. In Orissa as Podu, Dabi, Common or Bringa. In the western Ghats as Watra. In the southeast of Rajasthan as Penda, Bewar or Dahiya. And in the Madhya Pradesh district of Bastar as Dept or Kumari. Then, how can we define the shifting cultivation? Shifting cultivation is a rotational type of cultivation that is practiced by many indigenous or tribal communities in the tropics. It involves cutting and burning a patch of forest or grassland and then planting crops in the ash-enriched soil. The crops are typically grown for a few years until the soil becomes depleted, after which the land is left fallow for several years to allow the forest or grassland to regenerate. Jhum cultivation is a low input, low output farming system that is well adapted to the environmental conditions in which it is practiced. It provides food security for many indigenous and tribal communities and has been a sustainable agricultural practice for centuries. However, Jhum cultivation has come under increasing criticism in the recent years due to its negative impact on the biodiversity. So now let us understand the process of Jhum cultivation or the operation of Jhum cultivation. The operation of Jhum cultivation is started by jungle cutting in the months of December to January. After the jungle is being cut down and cleared, the debris is left to dry in the open. Then, from the month of February to March, setting of fire to the dried debris is carried out. This setting of fire operation is done with utmost care, so as to avoid forest areas from spreading across to the other hills not meant for Jhuming. After the fire is being set up, the next process is sowing and planting of crops. This process is done by dibbling in an intimate mixture of varied crops. Upland paddy is the main crop grown in mixture with maize, millet, sorghum, tapioca, chilies, cotton, turmeric, pumpkin, etc. Cropping is done with minimum tillage. Here, no animals or large implements are used for preparing the land. The only implements that are used are the chopping knife, sickle, dibbling stick, spade, and hoe. After the harvesting is completed, the land is abandoned for 3 to 5 years to rejuvenate itself, and the Jhuming is shifted to another site, and the same whole process is repeated again. So, you might be wondering, what are the climatic conditions required for Jhum cultivation? Basically, Jhum cultivation in India is commonly practiced in humid, low-latitude climatic regions where temperatures are relatively high and rainfall is abundant. Shifting cultivation is carried out by the world's 250 million people from different regions, majorly in the tropical rainforests of South America, Central and West Africa, and Southeast Asia. The cultivators here mainly depend on the rainy conditions. This method of cultivation enables the cultivators to grow different crops in each cycle. However, the fallow period between the two crop cycles has transformed land use patterns in many areas. People often ask, what is shifting cultivation and what are its disadvantages? Or what are the impacts of Jhum cultivation on the environment? So, let us now discuss some of the negative impacts of Jhum or shifting cultivation one by one. The first point is habitat loss. One of the most significant impacts of Jhum cultivation on biodiversity is habitat loss. The practice of Jhum cultivation involves clearing forest or grassland to create agricultural land, which can lead to the destruction of different habitats for a range of species. The clearing of forest can also lead to soil erosion, loss of nutrients, and changes in microclimates, which can have further impacts on biodiversity. Secondly, loss of species. The destruction of habitats through Jhum cultivation can also lead to the loss of species. Many species are reliant on specific habitats for survival, and the destruction of these habitats can lead to local extinctions. Also, the use of fire in Jhum cultivation can also directly kill or harm species, particularly those that are slow moving or have limited mobility. The third effect is fragmentation of habitats. Jhum cultivation can also lead to the fragmentation of habitats, which can have further negative impacts on biodiversity. Fragmentation can reduce the size and connectivity of habitats, which can make it more difficult for species to move between different areas, find their food and mates, and avoid the predators from being hunted. The next point is introduction of invasive species. Jhum cultivation can also lead to the introduction and spread of invasive species. But how does it take place? The clearing of land can create open spaces that are suitable for invasive species to colonize, and the disturbance of the soil can provide opportunities for the invasive plants to establish themselves. Invasive species can outcompete native species for resources, reduce the biodiversity, and alter the whole ecosystems. The fifth effect is loss of biodiversity. The loss of habitat due to Jhum cultivation has led to a significant decline in the biodiversity of the regions where it is practiced. Many species of plants and animals that are dependent on forest for their survival, including endangered species, are threatened by habitat loss and fragmentation. Let us take an example of the hollow gibbon, a critically endangered primate species found in the northeastern India. This is threatened by Jhum cultivation, which destroys its habitats and fragments its populations. Jhum cultivation also affects the diversity of plant species in the region. The traditional practice of Jhum cultivation involves the cultivation of crops such as rice, maize, and vegetables, which are not actually native to the region. As a result, the natural vegetation is replaced by crops that are not adapted to the local environment. And this has led to a decline in the diversity of plant species, as many of the native plant species are not able to compete with the introduced crops. The last and the sixth effect is soil degradation. Every one of us is aware that Jhum cultivation can also lead to soil degradation, which can have further negative impacts on biodiversity. The practice of Jhum cultivation involves burning the debris and vegetable on the land, which can reduce the organic matter in the soil and release nutrients. However, this can lead to soil erosion, loss of nutrients, and changes in microclimates, which can have further negative impacts on the biodiversity. Hence, shifting cultivation or Jhum cultivation is also criticized because of the principle that it degrades soil fertility and the fertility of forest lands in many tropical areas. Also, it has various negative impacts on the biodiversity, as I have discussed above now. But in some regions of India, such as Nagaland, shifting cultivation is nearly hard to entirely control. So, what to do in such a scenario? We can just minimize the impact of shifting cultivation on biodiversity by implementing some practices and taking some sustainable strategies. So, let us now discuss how we can minimize the impact of shifting cultivation on biodiversity and the environment. The first one is agroforestry. So, what is agroforestry? Agroforestry is a farming system that integrates trees and crops on the same land. The trees that are planted in the agroforestry systems can provide habitat for wildlife, reduce soil erosion, and improve the microclimate. Agroforestry can be used as an alternative to Jhum cultivation, as it provides similar benefits to Jhum cultivation, such as soil fertility and crop productivity, while also promoting biodiversity. It can also reduce the need for Jhum cultivation by providing a more sustainable source of food and income for indigenous communities. The second point is improve farming practices. Improved farming practices can also be implemented to reduce the negative impacts of Jhum cultivation on biodiversity. For example, conservation agriculture practices such as minimum tillage, crop rotation, and cover cropping can improve soil fertility and reduce the soil erosion. The use of organic fertilizers and natural pest control methods can also reduce the use of harmful chemicals that can negatively impact the biodiversity. The third strategy that can be adopted is forest protection and restoration. Protecting and restoring forests can also help to reduce the negative impact of Jhum cultivation on the biodiversity. This can be done by establishing protected areas, implementing community-based forest management, and promoting reforestation and afforestation programs. Protected areas can provide habitat for species that have been impacted by Jhum cultivation, while community-based forest management can involve indigenous communities in the conservation and management of forest. The fourth is conservation agriculture. What is conservation agriculture? Conservation agriculture is a farming system that involves minimum tillage, crop rotation, and the use of cover crops to maintain soil fertility and prevent soil erosion. This system can be used in place of Jhum cultivation to maintain the soil fertility and prevent soil erosion, while still allowing the communities to cultivate their crops for their livelihood. Conservation agriculture also helps to increase biodiversity by maintaining soil health and reducing the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. The last but not the least point is education and creating awareness. Education and awareness campaigns can also be implemented to promote sustainable land use practices and raise awareness about the negative impacts of Jhum cultivation on biodiversity. This can involve working with indigenous communities to promote alternative farming practices, as well as educating the wider public about the importance of biodiversity and the impacts of unsustainable land use practices. This is all about the steps or strategies that can be implemented to minimize the impacts of shifting or Jhum cultivation on our environment. Recently, there is a news coming from the state of Manipur. Amid the changing climatic condition, most farmers in the Tamenglong district of Manipur have given up the traditional Jhum cultivation, which is their main source of livelihood, and they have shifted to daily wage work, or even small farming. One 58-year-old farmer, Moses Gonmei, from Tabanglong village in Tamenglong district, who for the better part of his life has been depending on Jhum cultivation to support his family, said that the change in temperature and fluctuating rainfall have made many of his villagers leave for the district headquarters to work on daily wages. He also said that some have begun their own small farms, saying that it is too hot to work in the Jhum fields. Like Gonmei, several farmers from different villages of Tamenglong district have gave up shifting cultivation, realizing the importance of preserving forest and the environment. And this is indeed a very positive state from the environmental perspective. With this, I came to the end of today's discussion. To summarize, in summary, it can be said that Jhum cultivation has been a traditional farming practice for centuries, but it has come under increasing criticism in recent years due to its negative impact on biodiversity. The practice can lead to habitat loss, loss of species, fragmentation of habitats, invasive species, and soil degradation. However, there are several management strategies that can be implemented to reduce the negative impacts of Jhum cultivation, including agroforestry, improved farming practices, forest protection and restoration, and education and awareness. By promoting sustainable land use practices and protecting biodiversity, we can always ensure the long-term sustainability of our ecosystems and the benefits they provide. And that brings us to the end. I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention today. Thank you.